Hi friends, welcome and welcome back to the Infinite Library. This video is actually a sequel of sorts to my previously released video, you can find it here, that I did where I read all of the Goodreads Choice Awards 2025 horror books. However, I read other books that were horror this year, and I read other books that I thought were going to make it into those awards, and they didn't. So rather than that be wasted time, I figured I would talk to you about those books anyway. I'm also just going to briefly highlight some other horror books that came out this year that maybe haven't been getting recognition, or at least not for Goodreads. I haven't been able to read all of these, but I will be reviewing some of the ones I have read, and I will briefly go over some of the others that have come out that I think have been getting a lot of hype in other places but maybe weren't recognised. So I have a little stack here of books. Some of these I have read, some I haven't, some I'm not going to get to read in this video, but they are ones I want to get to in the future. So before we get going on the actual reviews, I'm actually just going to list for you guys a whole bunch of other 2025 horror releases that came out this year that maybe you weren't aware of, but they're ones that have been on my radar, ones that I was potentially thinking could be in the awards. These are the ones I have not read and probably won't get to review in this video, unfortunately, just because time. But one of them that I did expect and then I didn't expect to get in because it's an anthology and it's also a brick. It's The End of the World as We Know It. This is actually a whole bunch of different horror authors, some really big authors in here as well. We have S.A. Cosby, Josh Malerman, Ronald Malfi, Chuck Wendig, a whole bunch of people all writing stories set in the world of Stephen King's The Stand. It is a brick, however. As you can see, it's hurting my hand to hold it. So I do think that not a lot of people would have got to this, which is why I don't think it made it into the awards, and also because I do not think anthologies necessarily do well in the awards. And this is such a niche anthology. So wasn't surprised to see this in here, but wouldn't have been mad if it had made it in either. Would have been very funny to have picked this up against a new Stephen King book and seen which one did better. Then we do have a bunch more books that I do actually already own physically. So we have Senseless by Ronald Malfi. This is his new book. Was getting a lot of hype. Was surprised not to see it in there. We have the new Chuck Wendig book, The Staircase in the Woods. We have How to Survive a Horror Story by Mallory Arnold. The new Delilah S. Dawson book, House of Ideal. That one didn't make it in. And this one, I feel like maybe got disqualified because in the UK, we don't actually have it as two books in one. In America, they have these two Stephen Graham Jones novels as like a 2-in-1 book. Killer on the Road and The Babysitter Lives. And I think one of these was already released on its own in America, so I feel like that probably disqualified it. But both of these are by him and also came out this year. I'm not sure which one. I'll put down below which is the one that actually did come out earlier than 2025, but one of these is a new 2025 release, I believe. So in terms of the other books, I'm going to bring my laptop over because I have a list and I'm just going to read them all out to you with a little graphic to show you what there is. So of the other books that came out this year, we had actually 2 books by Clay McLeod Chapman, one of which was definitely under the rating, unfortunately, of 3.5 that you have to qualify to be in the Goodreads Awards. That was Wake Up and Open Your Eyes. This was getting so much hype when it came out. And yeah, the crickets once it did, and it's not got a good rating. At least it's around like 3.33, I think. He also had another book come out this year called Acquired Taste. So 2 books by him. And as far as I know, that one would have qualified. We have 13 Months Haunted by Jimmy Giuliano, definitely an author I've seen around. We have the new Paul Tremblay book, another. I've heard no one talking about this though, so like if I hadn't have looked it up, I wouldn't have known about it, to be honest, because I feel like no one's mentioned this book. We have the new Craig DeLuey book, My Ex the Antichrist. We have the new Eric LaRocca, although that came out very recently, so I feel like it may have just missed the cutoff, possibly. And that is We Are Always Tender with Our Dead. We have the new Olivia Blake book. I think she's had a couple of new books actually this year, but she specifically had a horror book that's been getting a hell of a lot of promo because she's actually been doing it with the Lucky Day author, Chuck Tingle, for a lot of it, but that is Girl Dinner by Olivia Blake. There's The Manor of Dreams by Christina Lee. The Witch of Willow Sound by Vanessa F. Penny. House of Monstrous Women by Daphne Farmer. The Hunger We Pass Down by Jen Suk-Fung Lee. Fiend by Alma Katsu. The Unseen by Anya Alborn. Cold Eternity by S.A. Barnes, someone who has been in the Goodreads Awards before, but I think mostly in sci-fi. But Not Too Bold by Hache Pueyo. The Resurrectionist by A. Ray Dunlap. And then there's a couple of others that I can't actually remember the titles. I've literally just noted them down and then haven't got around to finding it, but I will still tell you about them. So we also have Itch, which is this very iconic cover. Heard really good things about it. So those are a bunch of the books, and then there's a bunch of other books, which are the ones I'm going to talk to you about. So I only have a couple of these physical, however. So we're actually going to talk about a manga, which is volume 5, I believe, of The Summer Hikaru Died. First, originally came out in Japan 2024, but released in America and in Western countries this year. Very popular series now. This is a horror slice of life BL manga. Or just recently got an anime adaptation as well. Really shocked that What Stalks the Deep did not make it in. This is the third novella in the Sworn Soldier series by T. Kingfisher. Not surprised this didn't make it in. The average rating for this one is not great, but this is Cassandra Corr's new book, The Library at Hellebore. I'm not going to speak too in depth about this one because I did actually review this in a previous video, because I read it for Treasure or Trash, but I will briefly go over it. Then in terms of the other ones that I've read that you'll see in this video, we have Shy Girl by Mia Ballard, We Spread by Sarah Gailey, The Starving Saints by Caitlin Starling, The Unworthy by Augusta Bazterica, I want to say her name is. Listen to Your Sister by, I've forgotten the name, sorry, it's Nina something or other, Nina Vanille or something. One Yellow Eye, I've forgotten the author for this one, but you'll hear more about it once I actually do my review. Eat the Ones You Love, which was getting a lot of hype earlier this year, and then I don't think many people liked it, unfortunately, when it did come out. And finally, Victorian Psycho by the same author of Mrs. March, I believe, which did pretty well last year, I think. I'm pretty sure. That's all the ones I'm going to talk about. So those are the ones you'll be hearing me talk about in this video. I would have loved to have gotten to pretty much all of these books, to be honest, because I'm such a horror nerd, but I just don't have the time. But you'll get at least a good couple of reviews of ones that maybe you might be interested to check out once I've told you about them. So without further ado, let's get to the reviews. So I have finished Victorian Psycho. I am appropriately very green because that is kind of the theme colour of this book, at least this edition of this book anyway. There's also a very prominent green dress, which is described as the most disgusting green dress ever. Oh yeah, my thoughts about this book. This book is ridiculous. I can see why it would work for some people. I think it's also very much a Marmite book. I think if you're kind of not down for the humor and the type of very body fluids, grotesque, over-sexualized kind of horror that's in this book, it definitely is not going to be for you. And it wasn't really for me either. I actually did try to read this book a few months ago now, not long after it came out, and I DNF'd it about 50 pages in because it's the type of horror I really don't like. I am really not the type of person that likes horror where it's basically just things being gross for gross sakes. I had a similar experience with Freak's Law, and whilst I liked the underlying story in Freak's Law, I just couldn't get past how all of the horror was just to do with like bodily functions and stuff. And it's similar in this way, except you also have a Victorian governess who is massacring people in various horrific ways. So I haven't actually given you the premise of this book, so I'll do that now quickly. So we're in England in the 1800s, following Winifred Notty, who arrives at Emsall House prepared to play the perfect Victorian governess. She'll dutifully tutor her charges, tell them bed stories, and only joke about eating children. But the longer Winifred spends within the estate's dreary confines, and the more she learns of the perversions and pathetic preoccupations of the Pounds family, the more trouble she has sticking to her plan. Whether creeping across the moonlit lawns in her undergarments or gently tormenting the house staff, not gently, I would say, Winifred struggles at every turn to stifle the horrid compulsions of her past. That is until her chillingly dark imagination breaks the feeble boundary of reality one Christmas morning. So, I have to disagree with that premise. I don't think Winifred really struggles to control her compulsions at all. I think she revels in them. This is one of those books that unfortunately, it has some very interesting character portraits, but I did not like any single character in this book. I was definitely thinking for a good part of this book that it was just going to be kind of gratuitous horror and her wanting to kill everyone for like no real reason, and some of it is no real reason, but there is actually a motive that comes out later on in the book, and that does help to make certain sense of some things, of why she acts a certain way towards some people, about why this is less of a random act of violence and much more a concentrated act of violence with real meaning behind it. So I think that did save the book a little bit for me, but this book is absolutely ridiculous. It is definitely very comedic, in that kind of dry, dark, morbid sense of humour, a little bit like the namesake where this book comes from, which is American Psycho, I suppose, which I have read a long time ago. And it really felt that whilst I was reading this book, it felt like I was watching the last half of the movie The Substance, in that everything is so incredibly absurd with what is happening that you just can't help but to laugh at it, because it's just so over the top and stupid. So it's a hard one to rate, I think, because did I think this was a good book? Not really, no. But it made me laugh quite a bit, which I wasn't expecting. I did not expect that this was actually going to be quite funny with just how ridiculous it got. It does this thing, like every kind of chapter is split up into like almost little mini story vignettes, I suppose, like gradually going up until we get to Christmas Day. This takes place over 3 months before we hit Christmas Day, which is when everything goes down at once. It very much does this old style way that you see in all classics, where it like tells you about a summary of what is going to happen in the chapter. So in this one it says, in which I'm invited into the kennel, for example. And it's a very wry, dark sort of humour that definitely wouldn't work for most people. And I would say it didn't necessarily always work for me. But I think because I had tried to read this before, was initially put off by how grotesque the horror is. And then upon me trying to read it again for this video, I just kind of was expecting that. So I was like, okay, I'm expecting this to be the tone of the book now, and once I realised that was what it was trying to do, I just kind of saw the ridiculous side of it, and this book is absolutely bonkers. A really hard one for me to rate though, because do I objectively think this is a good book? No. I would probably, if I had to be objective, rate this a 2-star. I was like differing last night when I finished this. I was like, is this a high 2 or is this a low 3? But I think the fact that whilst I didn't necessarily enjoy my time with this book, I know it's not going to be one I will ever go back to, and I probably won't remember it that much. It did make me cackle with laughter at times, which was kind of unexpected, in the way that sometimes like a really bad schlocky over-the-top horror movie kind of does. So whilst I didn't like any of the characters, although I did appreciate the characterization, I don't like the type of horror this does, it made me laugh. So I think I'm gonna have to give this a low 3. I may end up changing this rating later, depending on how I feel about the other books. I may like read some others and decide that actually this one is a 2-star, but at least it wasn't boring. So that is something in its favour. But yeah, definitely one I would think I would really struggle to recommend to people unless I knew like this type of horror is their kind of thing. And I don't really know what this book could have done differently for me to have actually liked it. But yeah, a really interesting one. I'm glad, quotation marks, I decided to go back and give this one another try after having DNF'd it. Thankfully, it was short enough that I easily finished it in one day. It's very quick to read, and to be honest, you don't want to sit with this book for very long because of how grotesque it is. I couldn't imagine having read this like over the course of a week or something. I think I would have got tired of it. But because I read it so quickly, it was alright, I guess. So yeah, that is my review, I guess, of Victorian Psycho. An interesting one. Definitely not one that I will ever revisit, but it definitely does fit into the horror category. So, the next book I'm going to be talking about is Shy Girl by Mia Ballard. This was getting quite a lot of hype towards the start of this year, and then it kind of seemed to vanish, and I wasn't sure what happened. And I did finally discover what happened with that from Jordaline Rees when I finally listened to her review of it. And I think the thing is that Shy Girl was initially published independently. I don't think it was a very big print run, and so it has gone totally out of print at the moment. It is getting a traditional publication this year as well, but I think because of that, even though it technically released, I want to say back in March or something this year, not a lot of people have been able to get their hands on a copy of it. I actually was very lucky and was able to get my hands on an e-arc of this book from NetGalley. So that's how I read it. I read this as a digital book. It also had an additional short story at the end, which I don't know is going to be in the physical version or not, so I'm not going to talk about that. But yeah, that is how I read it basically, and if you are struggling to find a copy, that might be also why you're struggling to find it. Shy Girl, this is Mia Ballard's, not her debut novel, I think, but wrote a very short novella previous to this, but I think this might be her proper debut novel. And it's an interesting one. It is one that I went into with a lot of trepidation. Reading the premise of this book, I was like, I don't know if this is just going to creep me out, and it really doesn't sound like it's going to be for me. So I'll tell you what it's about. So in this book, Shy Girl, we are following this mixed race girl called Gia. She is on the struggle bus basically at the moment. She's not having a good time. She's lost her job. She doesn't really have very many people that she can count on. She has a really distant relationship with her father related to his alcohol abuse. She has like one good friend, but they're both very different because her friend is like a mother and successful, I suppose, whereas she isn't. But she has only one friend that she really talks to, and she's about to get evicted because she is flat broke thanks to her being unemployed. She also really struggles with OCD, and a lot of this first portion of the book is quite a slow-paced book, which I really enjoyed in this. I didn't feel like it was slow, but when I look back at how events proceeded, it's a lot more rooted in seeing her daily life and her struggles and her mentality prior to actual things happening. So she's on the struggle bus of life, and she needs money and she needs it fast, otherwise she's gonna be homeless. As I said, she really struggles with OCD, and a lot of that bleeds into her life as having this really structured routine that she puts herself through, I assume, to stop herself spiraling. So she essentially joins a dating app for sugar daddies to try and find someone who can help her out of this situation. And very quickly she ends up making contact with this man called Nathan, who seems to be the right person for her, and she asks him to help her out of the situation that she's in. However, she finds out very quickly that what Nathan wants from her is not the typical sort of companion. He wants her to be his pet dog in every aspect of that word. Something that she is very hesitant going into, but he pays a lot of money, so she's like, sure, it can't be that bad. And then things escalate, and they escalate a lot. So this book has been described as extreme horror. I haven't read enough extreme horror yet to really kind of be able to tell if that is kind of what this is, but I can kind of see where this is coming from. This is a very claustrophobic, very dark themed novel that has the main character undergoing trauma for quite a long extended period of time as well. I would definitely check trigger warnings if we're going into this book. Things such as sexual assault, dehumanization, pregnancy are all things that come up in this book. I really thought I was not going to be on board for this book. I thought I was going to get really creeped out and squicked by it. And I actually kind of had a great time with this book. This book was absolutely wild. And as I said before, on paper, this book should not have worked for me. I really don't enjoy horrors that tend to focus on themes such as sexual assault. I find that very triggering. And for me personally, it's not the type of horror I enjoy. It sounds weird, but I am someone that likes to enjoy horror that is kind of fun. And that to me isn't fun. Human suffering is not fun. And only when it is written in a very good way and executed well do I enjoy that kind of book. But thankfully, that was the experience I had with this book. Mia Ballard's writing is really compulsive and she has some beautiful turns of phrase, and I really enjoyed the writing in this book. And I think because so much of this book we're inside our protagonist Gia's head and seeing things from her perspective, I think was done really well, to the point that even while she is having these horrible things happen to her, that even though these really horrible things were happening to her, I wasn't put off from reading the book. In fact, I was like immersed, and I found this to be a really compulsive read, almost like reading a thriller, to be honest, except I feel like it's going to stick with me more than a thriller because I mostly forget thrillers once I've read them. But yeah, like, I thought the characterization of our main character here, who you are with obviously the whole time in her head, stuck in these horrible circumstances, I thought it was written really well. And what I also enjoyed about this is that it wasn't just torture for the sake of torture, because as the plot progresses, I'm not going to spoil what happens, but let's just say that Gia undergoes a transformation of sorts. She evolves, and she evolves to a point where she is able to take back her autonomy. And obviously, as I said at the start of the book, she is a control freak. She has to control everything. And then what happens with Nathan takes away all of her autonomy. And she manages to get it back in a way that I personally really enjoyed. And whilst it could still be seen as quite a dark ending, I did actually find the ending quite satisfying and kind of empowering. And I think that it didn't trivialize the trauma that she went through. I think it justified it a little bit, and it made it clear that, you know, you can still undergo really horrible things, traumatic events, and you can still come out from that and find yourself again, essentially. So yeah, unexpectedly really enjoyed this book. I'm actually giving this a low 4. I feel like I may even rate it a little bit higher because I was absolutely obsessed with this book whilst I was reading it. I could not put it down. I read it in like a day, essentially. It was definitely an uncomfortable reading experience. Not something I could really recommend to people, but I do think the writing was great. I really enjoyed the character arc for a main character, and I would definitely read from this author again. So yeah, I can kind of see why this book has been kind of kicking off, why it's been getting a lot of hype. Really didn't think it was going to be for me, but pleasantly surprised that I actually ended up really liking this one. This book also really reminded me of another book that I read earlier this year for BookTuber's favourites, and that is Anibot. And I didn't really like that book very much, but I think this book deals with a lot of the same themes and a similar kind of storyline, I would say. Only, of course, we have a woman who is a robot rather than a woman who is a pet dog. But I feel like this book really worked for me, whereas that book didn't. I think the execution and the writing of Shy Girl is what made the book work for me, when Anibot just kind of flopped and made me really angry, and I didn't feel satisfied by the ending for that book. Yeah, overall, I'm giving this one a 4.25. It's sitting pretty high up on my book list, which is a surprise. And yeah, probably a book I can see myself going back to and picking up again, and definitely reading more from Mia Ballard in the future. I think she's one to watch for sure. So this book now that I'm going to be reading is We Live Here Now by Sarah Pinborough. I really think the cover is quite iconic, although also definitely looks more like a mystery thriller cover, but I do believe this is a horror. It's on the shorter side as well, which I'm happy about because I read quite a long one just before this and I could definitely use something that feels a bit breezier now. So this is actually the same author who she's written a whole bunch of stuff, but one of the things she has written is Behind Her Eyes, which I haven't read, but I did watch the TV series for. I had a decent time with it. I thought it had some interesting twists that definitely caught me off guard. So that is all I know about her at the moment, her previous work, and this book is actually set in the United Kingdom, which is nice because so many of the horrors we see, I think, are often set in America. So this one is about a couple that have a troubled marriage that end up going to this house, and there is something not right with the house, basically. I do love me a haunted house book. I've read a couple of them and they've not always worked for me. For example, I know last year I Used to Live Here was a very popular one that played with that whole haunted house kind of trope, and that one didn't really work for me, but this one kind of feels like it's going to be a little bit more straightforward, and what I want from this is atmosphere. That's what I'm really hoping for, because I'm worried this is going to go and be more of a family drama, but I want the horror atmosphere to be overtaking that a little bit and play in with a family drama, rather than it being family drama with just a little touch of something creepy going on. So I'll tell you the premise for it. Emily wakes from a coma following an accident that nearly kills her and finds herself agreeing to move from London to the wild moors of Devon with her husband Freddie. A fresh start is exactly what their marriage needs. So right away we've got all the red flags there that this is going to be about these two crumbling. As their car pulls up to Larkin Lodge, their dream country house, Emily's heart sinks. Outside, everything is covered in an icy grey mist. Yeah, welcome to England, to be honest. Inside, the air is filled with dust and abandonment, and then she finds the empty suite on the second floor. A room so bleak, so cold, so void of anything good. Something bad happened in here. Someone died in here. Why can't Freddie feel the darkness that stirs within its walls? There's something wrong with the house, this strange house where the floorboards creak at night, the doors rattle, the windows slam shut, the taps turn on and off, and on and off. But if the house is hiding something, so are Emily and Freddie. Which, that last thing does intrigue me, because if her other books are anything to go by, Sarah Pinborough likes a twist. And I would love for this couple to give the house a run for its money. That's kind of what I'm hoping for, a bit of a twist on the haunted house, and that, you know, the house is trying to scare the bejesus out of them, and they scare it right back. I would love that. So that's what I'm hoping for from this book, and we'll see. It's got a whole host of literary blurbs here. I don't know if this is for this book in particular or just generally her writing, but they are saying it's spooky, full of twists, darkly funny, genuinely creepy, and a spooky thriller. So we'll see, I guess, if it lives up to that. I would really like to enjoy this one because it's one of those that I think has such a deceptively simple premise that if the author decides to do some real twists of it, it could be really fun. So I have started We Live Here Now. We did get the title drop as well, and not too far into the book, and it's fine so far. It's all told in first person, which makes it very easy to read. It is very readable as well in terms of the writing. And we're seeing it from three different perspectives at the moment. One who is the wife, Emily, one who is husband, Freddie, but very infrequently. We're mostly seeing things from Emily's point of view. And also from a raven, whose partner died in the house, presumably. So he's still kind of hanging around. And we're occasionally just seeing things from his point of view. I'm assuming we're maybe going to discover some stuff about the past through the raven that was there in the past. Emily is starting to have these like creepy things happening in the house, hearing noises, and windows keep randomly opening. And there was an instance with a Ouija board, which as soon as it showed up, I'm like, you never use a Ouija board. Do you not know anything about horror movies? But they did, with predictably creepy effects. But nothing has really come out yet about what is going on. Emily suspects that there has been a murder in the house, and that is what is kind of haunting that, or she's just getting recovery symptoms and making her hallucinate and stuff. So she's now looking into the history of the house itself, which has made her like start to get involved with a couple of people that live nearby. There's the vicar and then this like artsy couple as well. But so far this book is doing the thing I'm kind of hoping it wasn't going to do, in that we're basically just seeing all the cracks in this marriage. And I always think this when I read these types of books, that these people just shouldn't be together because they don't like each other and they're hiding loads of things from each other, and they're very irritated and dismissive of each other. Whether or not the house is kind of aggravating that at the moment, but they've both been keeping secrets from each other. We've already found out Emily's secret, which was pretty obvious, and it's very clear that Freddie is keeping something from Emily, and even to the point of him being like, I hope she stays a little bit crazy because that is best for her right now. So yeah, really don't like him. But yeah, I'm hoping this gets more into the spookiness and what's happened in the past at this house, because at the moment I really don't like these two as a couple. Basically, I really hate it when people are together and it's very obvious that they really shouldn't be together, and that is so far the case in this book. So I have indeed finished We Live Here Now by Sarah Pinborough. This was such a quick read, especially after reading what was kind of a very frustrating overlong horror book before this one. And this one was just so readable, and very readable in the way that a thriller is, but there is definitely horror elements in this one. It wasn't like the best horror I've ever read, but I thought it was really well done, and I was satisfied by Sarah Pinborough's twist for this book, because you all wanted a twist, and Sarah Pinborough's gonna give it to you. So yeah, this starts off as being a domestic thriller kind of thing, which I'm not really a big fan of a married couple that are kind of going through some problems both in their individual lives, in their marriage, with each other, that kind of thing, and they're both hiding secrets from each other, and then they move into this house in the middle of nowhere in Devon, essentially, and both of them start to experience strange things in the house, things like it being cold all the time, strange smells, noises. And I'm certainly not going to spoil what the twist is, but I did think it was really well done. And although I don't know if I quite enjoyed the ending, it did kind of make me chuckle a little bit. And I did think the horror elements as well were quite well done. A lot of it is to do with dreams that the two have whilst they're there. And there is some like really good visual, terrifying images that come through in these dreams that the two characters have in this house. Weirdly enough as well, we have our main couple here, but then we have two other couples as well who are their friends, and they're kind of this gang of six, and they kind of also come to the house at times. And for some reason, I don't know what it was, but I just saw the whole group as the group of friends from Happy Place, which, if you know, I really didn't enjoy that book and I hated most of the characters in it. And I just really saw the cast in this book as the cast from Happy Place, so that was kind of amusing for me. But yeah, I don't think this is going to be like one of the winners for the horror category. It's definitely not going to be one of my favorite horror books of the year, but I found it to be a really fun, easy read. It gave me some of the creep factor that I wanted, because it's all told in first person in 3 different perspectives. Mostly we have Emily's perspective, who is the wife, and then we have a little bit from Freddie's perspective, who is her husband, and then also from Raven's perspective, who I really enjoyed the Raven story, which was not what I was expecting from this. And the Raven story throughout I thought was really well done, particularly with starting to drop breadcrumbs about what's happening in the house and kind of mirroring certain elements of the couple's marriage. But yeah, this was told in first person, so that is always a very readable kind of thing, I think, when things are told in first person. And I flew through this. I read this in a day easily. It's not super long either. It's just over 300 pages. I think I'm going to be giving this one a 3.5, which to me, a 3.5 is a decent book. It's not going to be one that necessarily really sticks with me, but I had a good time with it, and it was kind of a perfect seasonal read. This is actually set around January time for quite a bit of it, so if you're looking for a post-Christmas horror book, then maybe this is the one. But yeah, I did enjoy this one. I don't know if I would check out more of Sarah Pinborough's work, because I do think that this is the second work I know of hers now after Behind Her Eyes, and I do think her twists are really good. But I still didn't really like any character in this book, unfortunately. So it didn't really get me emotionally in terms of what was happening with the marriage. I almost kind of wish that once the main character found out the twist, that she kind of went through the certain thing that she chose not to do, although it was interesting that she didn't choose to do it. I thought the ending was just kind of really funny, and I like that kind of thing that horror books do sometimes, where it doesn't necessarily end happily, but it ends in a way that kind of makes you chuckle a little bit, and I think this is one of those books. So yeah, I had a good time with this one. Mid-3, I think, overall, and was in some ways exactly what I was expecting it to be, with like it being sort of a domestic thriller, but I'm glad that the horror really went for it when we did get the horror, and the twist was really good. So this one is kind of a hard one for me to review because it is a sequel, it is volume 5 in an ongoing manga series. But this is one of my favourite manga series right now. I absolutely adore this. This is The Summer Hikaru Died by Moku Moku Ren. Recently got an anime adaptation which is on Netflix, so check it out if you're intrigued, I guess. But yeah, this essentially is the story of two boys. There is an underlying romance going on between the two, but that isn't really the main focus of the story. But there is a romance, they have a very deep friendship to one another, but a lot of the story is about grief, it's about mystery, and it's about the strange village that the two are growing up. So basically at the start of this series, well, prior to the start of the series to be honest, Yoshiki, who is our main character, his best friend Hikaru went up into the mountains during the summer, and when he came back, he wasn't Hikaru anymore. Something else is in his body, puppeting it, essentially. Yoshiki figures this out very quickly. Hikaru kind of reveals himself to him, and it is about the two trying to carry on after this fact. Yoshiki trying to deal with the grief that his best friend is essentially dead, but also being curious, starting to bond with this new version of Hikaru, who, by the way, not only looks like Hikaru, but also has all of his memories, has kept a lot of his emotions, that kind of thing. And something is not right about the village they grow up in too, and I think it's tied into what exactly happened to Hikaru as well. So that is the basic premise for the story. This was, again, a very solid volume. All of these volumes are like 5 4-star reads for me. This was more of a 4, I think, because it was a little bit slow paced. This is also what we call a slice of life series, so it's not all horror all the time. There's a lot of just daily life mundanity mixed into that, and I really enjoy that kind of thing with horror. So yeah, I think that's all I can really tell you about this series, but if it's something that you've never heard of before, if maybe you're wanting to check out a manga and you like horror, highly recommend this series. It is still ongoing. The next volume is coming out, I believe, early next year, though it could be towards the end of this year, I'm not entirely sure. And I don't know if the anime is going to veer off and do its own thing, but really, really solid psychological horror series. Some very quick book updates here. I am actually reading 2 of the horror books at the moment. I have started The Starving Saints by Caitlin Starling. I have an audiobook arc for that one, and I'm actually really enjoying it. I feel like I've not heard people liking this one, but I'm kind of having a good time with it. We're following these 3 different women in this convent. They're stuck in a siege, so that's why they're starving. And then these like weird saints have turned up and they appear to be like magically bringing food to them, but it's not really what it seems. and I'm just having a good time with it. I find all three of the characters quite interesting, and how they're connected to each other is quite interesting so far. It hasn't gone full tilt loopy yet, but I'm kind of expecting it is going to. But I'm actually really enjoying this so far, and I do think the audiobook is a good way to go. It's only one narrator for all three women, but I think she's doing really good. And yeah, I wasn't expecting to really have a good time with this one. I actually do have another book by Caitlin Starling too, which I've kind of been putting off reading, which is The Last to Leave the Room, and I've not heard good things about that. But I'm enjoying this one. Hello, not the best lighting, I'm aware, but I am here to tell you about The Starving Saints by Caitlin Starling. And I feel like I'm gonna have an unpopular opinion on this book, because I kind of feel like most people would not like this book. I haven't really heard many people talking about it, and I kind of get the vibe that it's not going to be most people's things, but it kind of slapped. Not gonna lie, I listened to this by an audiobook. I had an audiobook arc for it, and I haven't read anything by Caitlin Starling before. I do have her book that was in Evernight, which is The Last to Leave the Room, which I've not heard great things about, so I've not really heard many people that have liked her work before in the past. I can't remember what else she's done. These are some of the other books she's done. I am intrigued in some of the other sci-fi stuff, but this is actually a pure horror fantasy book rather than a sci-fi book, which I know at least The Last to Leave the Room, and I think it's The Luminous Dead, is a sci-fi book. So this is set in presumably some kind of medieval European setting. We're not really ever told exactly where it's set, but I get European vibes from the names. And we're actually following three different protagonists through this book. We're following Phocine, who is the mad woman, basically, who used to be a nun. The whole book is actually set inside a priory, which is under siege, which also has a king in residence, and they're all starving, hence the Starving Saints. And that is where we start this book. Is the whole priory is slowly starving to death, and they are in dire need of food, otherwise they are not going to last, essentially, and they can't leave because they're under siege. So our mad woman, Phocine, has previously been able to create a couple of miracles here and there, so the king has tasked her to make food happen, basically, but she has no clue how she's going to do this. So she's a very interesting character. All three of them I found to be really interesting characters who had really interesting backstories as well, and they were all very different from one another, which I think really worked. So Phocine is someone who has issues with her faith, obviously, because she's gone away from her faith into magic, essentially, but she also doesn't really have a clue how to use this magic or how it works. So she is trying to figure that out, basically, and being given this impossible task. We're also following Savoyne, who is a female knight inside the priory, who has been tasked to sort of look after Phocine, but also is trying to protect everyone else in the priory and save the people. And we're also following a servant girl called Trailer, who has a linked past to Savoyne, shall we say, and is extremely resourceful in her own right as well, and she is just seeking a way out of the prioress, but also has some unfinished business with Savoyne as well. And I really enjoyed these three protagonists. They all had their moments where they had moments of weakness. Interesting, Savoyne, I think, perhaps had some of the greatest moments of weakness, which was kind of interesting with her being a knight. But I thought they were all really interesting characters, and I liked the interplay that they all had with each other and how they ended up both relying on each other and not trusting each other or having to make bargains with each other. The main plot as well, aside from the fact that they're all starving, is that these three saintly figures basically just appear one day when all hope is lost, and from then on, like, food is just there, but it's not right. There is something not right about these saints. Everyone is falling under a spell under them, and there is definitely something very dark, very monstrous about them. And they're three characters, only two of them I think we really get a good kind of screen time with. The third one I think is just more in the background, but they all kind of have their own interplay with the saints, with the three women, and are trying to overcome the new devilish thing that is going to basically not only like take away the people's lives, but to also take away their humanity. And yeah, I just really had a good time with this. I really enjoyed the writing. I thought the audio version of this, because I listened to it by an audiobook, was really well done. Like, I didn't struggle to tell apart the different perspectives. I kind of went into this and not really sure if I was gonna like it. I do like more fantastical kind of horror a lot of the time. I like having multiple protagonists. I like having female protagonists, or female identifying protagonists at least. But I wasn't sure how far into like the gruesome and the grim we were gonna get, and if it was gonna push past the line I wasn't keen on. And actually I really enjoyed what it did. I think there was like a good amount of body horror. If you kind of know the vibes going into this book, you know we're going down a bit of a cannibalism route, and I think that was used well. I don't think they dragged it out for too long. Like, you kind of knew what was happening pretty quickly, which I think was good, rather than it being a very late story reveal. And it was a lot of action, which is also kind of unexpected for a horror. Like, there was an awful lot of events and plot happening. There's a lot packed into this book. It was like 11 hours, I think, 300 or something pages, but like it felt like it was a lot longer than that in terms of what plot happened, but not in a slow-paced way, if you get me. Like, I was like fully along for the ride, and I just really enjoyed it. Like, I feel, again, like this is just not going to be everyone's kind of thing. But for me, it really worked. I really enjoyed the characterization. I enjoyed the lore. There was definitely still some stuff that wasn't completely answered, with some mysteries about certain things, particularly about something that is in the tunnels. But overall, I had a really good time with this. I would give this, I kind of want to say a mid-4, honestly. It probably is more of a low 4, and I feel like because I've literally just finished it once, like the enthusiasm and the high from me finishing it, because I did enjoy the ending as well, which was something that I was like, if it slips and falls at the ending, this is gonna rate it down lower, because it's clearly building to something. But I actually really enjoyed where it went, and yeah, it just really worked for me. And it was, yeah, really gross, but also really kind of inspiring at times, and super interesting world building. So yeah, that was a win for me, unexpectedly. One I would struggle to recommend to other people, though, I think, because of the body horror and some of the themes and stuff. But for me, at least, I really enjoyed it. So yeah, that was a very unexpected win for me with those books. So I am here to talk about The Unworthy by Augustina Bazterrica. You may know this author as the author of Tender as the Flesh, which is a book I've actually been wanting to read and hadn't got around to it. So unintentionally, this is my first book by this author. I also really hate the UK cover for it. It's kind of hideous. This is the American cover, which I think is much more the vibe. This definitely kind of gives away. This has a slight sci-fi dystopian twist, but don't love it. Really don't love it. Also, the fact that it's got pages of bugs on it, which, you know, great for some people, maybe not for me. This was a weird one. It's very short, as you can see. It's just a novella, and this is by an Argentinian author. She also writes a lot of short story writers, has had lots of awards, and this is a translated book as well, originally in Spanish. So, what is this book about? A little bit of a weird one. This is a horror, but it's also a sci-fi dystopia, but we don't necessarily learn exactly all the details about why this place is a dystopia. We're mostly set in this very small, enclosed community of people that is called the House of the Sacred Sisterhood, and essentially there are different groups of people within this house. There are the Unworthy, who our main character is one of these people. They are essentially like the ordinary worshippers, I suppose. Underneath them, they have servants, which are people who don't really have any sort of potential ability to go further up into the echelons of this sisterhood. They're not really religious as such, they're more just people that have been taken in to serve the rest of the community. And the whole thing with the Unworthy basically is that they often desire to be upholded into the other areas of this sisterhood. So we have the Enlightened, who basically considered as like saints or deities almost. And then there are different kinds of people who are called the Chosen, and they have various like mutilations, like their eyes are sewn shut, their ear boxes are ruptured so they can't hear, and it is basically that they can like be closer to the god that they believe in and hear their teachings and be able to speak them essentially. But our main character wants to be one of the Enlightened, because to be an Enlightened means you are not mutilated. But what actually being an Enlightened means, she doesn't really know, to be honest. She just knows that it is something that they aspire to be, and that they are taken away to another place where presumably they have a happy life, is kind of what it is. But as you start to learn a little bit more about that and how corrupt this religion is. So basically the whole deal with this religion is that something happened to the world, and disease, death, pestilence, changes in weather happened basically, and this kind of religious organization takes in women who happen to pass by and makes them into either the Unworthy, or if they are showing like illnesses or some kind of marring on their bodies, they become servants. Basically everything is dangerous out in the world, and it's very easily that you can become ill, corrupted, disease, that kind of thing. They also only take in women. Men are killed. And throughout the course of this book, a new woman is found by our main character called Lucia, and she joins and they kind of form a bond, which does make our main character change and start to unveil stuff about what is truly happening behind. And it all sounds very interesting, but it just didn't really work for me. And I think that is because the tone is incredibly nihilistic. The main character does thankfully change throughout the course of this book, but when we first meet her, she is honestly like one of the most malicious people you could ever meet. Like, we're seeing her perspective because she's kind of writing a diary throughout the course of this book and having to hide it because it's forbidden to do that kind of thing and write things down. A lot of things are forbidden in this church for the Unworthy, so she's illegally doing this, but all the way from like at the beginning, all the things she's talking about is how she can like get one up over on the other people in the sisterhood, how people in the sisterhood will be punished, how she hates this one specific person who is seen as one of the like favoured people by the sister, who is the head really. And there's also this like mysterious male figure who they never see, who is kind of like even higher than the sister. But yeah, she was a real struggle to read from. It honestly did remind me a lot of when I was reading Victorian Psycho, in how violent and really aggressive personality that the main character had, no compassion for other people, really just kind of seeing them as playthings a lot of the time, and that was not fun to be in. She does thankfully change a little bit throughout the course of the book. I don't think she necessarily completely loses that attitude, but we do start to see her showing empathy and for the people around her, which was nice to see, even if that was because she was kind of being influenced by the woman who she's kind of fallen for. So that I liked that we did get to see some character progression from the main character. The writing is fine. There are some really nice instances of writing through this, but I think this one just didn't quite work for me. I didn't want it to be any longer, but because it's short, there just wasn't really enough details about the background of our main character, of the world, and how it got to this place. And everything was just so unpleasant, really, in the church that I didn't really want to know much more about it. You do finally discover a little bit more about what's going on and what is happening to the Enlightened towards the end, and it was really not pleasant, which I kind of was expecting. Overall, I just didn't really enjoy this book at all. It had some interesting ideas and I didn't hate the writing, so I would definitely read from this author again, but this particular book didn't work for me. It was just too dark and oppressive in its tone, and I really didn't like our main protagonist. So I'm giving this one a 2.75, I think. Not quite a 3 because I feel like it missed the mark with me, but not the worst thing I've ever read. But yeah, not one I will be going back to, that is for sure. So I am here to talk to you about Spread Me by Sarah Gailey, otherwise known as What If the Thing Was Really Horny? That is kind of the plot of this book, to be honest. We are following a very remote kind of excavation team in the middle of nowhere in the desert, and at the very beginning of the story, this is a novella. I actually listened to this via an audio arc. At the very beginning, they kind of find this specimen in the desert that appears to be breathing, but only the leader, Kenzie, kind of notices that. And basically from the beginning, it's obvious that Kenzie's kind of attracted to the specimen, and things escalate. Basically, they bring the specimen in, it starts to make people ill, presumably, so they have to quarantine, and then things start happening, which means that it seems like this specimen is kind of invading people in the team, and you don't know who is still human, that kind of thing. So yes, very much like John Carpenter's The Thing. Follows some of the same plot beats, I suppose, even references it, so it is very self-aware in what it's doing. But yeah, the weird factor of this is that our protagonist, Kenzie, who is the leader of the team, and is known for being an asexual woman, like all the other people kind of are shacking up with each other because they've been there for 10 months and she just has no interest in that kind of thing. But she is attracted to viruses, it seems, and it also seems like this is something that was a thing for her prior to her meeting the specimen. It gets pretty wild, and yeah, this is the age-old tale of woman meets sexy virus, I suppose. It was interesting, I will say that. I did like the writing for it. I thought it was pretty well written. The audiobook narration was pretty good as well. And I did think the characterization was quite good. We had like about 6 or 7 different characters, and I thought they were all like fairly well characterized in quite a short amount of time, which is hard to do because it very much did play like a horror movie with how quick things were moving, how fast the stakes were changing and getting higher and higher and higher. So yeah, I didn't mind this one. I think I would give this a low to mid 3. It was more kind of amusing in some ways than a true horror. Like, there was definitely horror elements. It definitely did go down the body horror route, and the body horror stuff was quite interesting, but I just kind of couldn't take it seriously because of the whole thing with her finding the virus attractive. I'm gonna say you do you, girl, but when you do you, girl ends up threatening the lives of your entire team, maybe don't you do you, girl. But yeah, it was an interesting experience, not one I can see myself ever going back to. I would maybe try more from this author just because I do think her writing was decent, but I'm not going to give this more than like a low 3. I don't think it's not going to be one that really sticks with me other than, oh yeah, that was that story. So yeah, a very quick review for this one. I don't really have a lot of thoughts. It's only 5 hours long in terms of the audiobook, so very quick and breezy, but not the worst way to spend a couple of hours, I suppose. So I'm not going to talk about The Library at Hellebore by Cassandra Core for very long. I actually have a full review vlog of me reading this for my Treasure or Trash episode because it got picked by one of my friends to read for the month of October. But yeah, I will caveat by saying that I am a Cassandra Core fan. She's very much a Marmite author. You either really like her style or you really don't like her style. It just doesn't work for you. Her first book, Nothing But Blackened Teeth, is not great. Everyone basically knows this. We kind of pretend it doesn't exist, but I personally really adored her second book, which is The Salt Grows Heavy, which is about a mermaid going off of a plague doctor in this weird apocalyptic kind of world, and I really loved it. Cassandra Clare excels in her writing, I think. She's very lyrical, she's very poetical, she has made best friends with a thesaurus, and she wants you to know that. This, however, was a bit of a mixed bag for me. This is a book that I love the set decorating of this book, and I love the intentions of this book, I love the writing of this book, but it is a little bit hollow, unfortunately. Like, this is too short. I think she does tend to write shorter fiction, but I think this one needed more time to breathe. And the thing is that although I really loved what I saw in this book, there just wasn't enough for me to really get into this, for me to really understand the characters and the world. And it's a shame because everything I do see is so intriguing. I had to give this book a low 3 because I was really having a good time with it, but I just wasn't getting what I wanted. I wanted so much more than what this book gave me, which is unfortunate because we're probably never going to learn it. But I am keeping this book, even though it's a low 3, because I think it's such a curiosity and I want to just keep delving back into it and trying to figure out what on earth is happening in it. Basically, this is a dark academia horror. It goes hard on the body horror, so definitely this does fall into the horror category, and it is about this school essentially called Hellebore, which essentially houses people who have a lot of powers, who are particularly dangerous. Like, they are people who can end the world. And our main character, Elena, I think her name is, Alessa, sorry, the Silent Hill references are strong in this book. She is someone who is at this school, and we skip back and forth in time between her starting the school and getting to know the people there, and towards the end of the school year at graduation, when they're all hiding in the library from the staff who are trying to kill and eat them. And there are some really interesting characters and there's some really interesting ideas. We just don't see enough of them. So yeah, I loved this, but it's a frustrating read, unfortunately, and it's hard for me to recommend because you are not going to get what you want from this. Definitely one that I was not surprised to not see in the Goodreads Awards. I'm not surprised it's got a low rating. I had to rate it low, but I'm still kind of obsessed with this book. So, the other book that I read earlier this year actually had an audiobook ARC for it, which is why I ended up listening to it. Very good audiobook, I would say. Is One Yellow Eye by Lee Radford. Haven't read anything else by this author before. I'm not sure what else they've done, to be honest. Okay, I've checked. It's actually their debut book. They're a British author, so the book itself is set in Britain. Totally unrelated, but the covers for this book are so interesting. The UK cover is this, which is kind of iconic, but the American cover is this. Look how freaking gorgeous this is. And I would say I think this is probably more thematically correct to the book in question. So this is a zombie book, it's also a sci-fi book, and horror, but this is not necessarily pure horror for me. I would say this is very much a book about grief. We're following our main character, Kester. She is a scientist, and there is this like zombie outbreak that happens at the start of the book. But then it kind of gets sorted out and like people kind of go back to normal again. But there is this fear of the zombie outbreak coming back. So she's one of the scientists who's trying to work on a cure essentially to, you know, prevent this from happening. However, she is keeping a big secret, and that is the fact that for her, finding a cure for the virus is even more important because her husband is a zombie and she has him trapped at home. So everyone who was a zombie during the outbreak was basically captured and killed, and she like sheltered her husband, has him tied up, and is still like feeding him and all that kind of thing, and is looking after him essentially, even though he is a zombie. But so much of this book is about her grief, about the fact that her husband is essentially dead, and her kind of hoping that she can get him back somehow. I did like this book, but I didn't love this book, unfortunately. I think for me, it just didn't delve enough into the horror, and it was a lot too heavy on the grief, which is maybe not something that I love to read about, essentially, but I did think it was well done. I think it was well written from what I remember. I read this like 6 months ago now, so I'm sorry for the hazy details, But yeah, definitely a book that, as I said, would caveat going into, this book is not really a horror. This is about grief. And that is really what this book is about. So another book that definitely did not make the cutoff because it's got quite a low rating is Listen to Your Sister by Nina Vial. This is another British author, I believe, at least the audiobook, which is how I listened to it because I had an audio ARC for it, feels British, but I could be wrong. Like, there's a lot of slang in this, there's a lot of cultural dialect in this book, and I think, to be honest, a lot of the slang the teen speaks, the cultural stuff that's in this, is why this book hasn't resonated with people. When this first came out, this was very much likened to a Jordan Peele movie because it is about Black people in a horror environment and dealing with that, along with also the pressures of being Black people. We actually got told this story in 3 different perspectives. We have our main character Carla and her 2 younger brothers. So she has basically become the caretaker for the youngest brother, who is about 13, 14 or something. And that is very much what this book is about, is her having to shoulder all these burdens at a very young age and how that's affected her, and how the 3 of her siblings kind of work as a dynamic. I thought this was a really fascinating book. I thought the sibling dynamic was really well done, like how they annoy the piss out of each other, but how genuinely they love each other and how family is the most important thing and they would do anything for each other. So yeah, it takes a long while for the plot to get going, unfortunately, in this book. I did give it a 3, like I didn't love it. It was one of those, I liked what it was doing and I really liked parts of it, but then there were definitely parts that just didn't work for me, and I think one of it is the slow pacing. Essentially, it takes quite a while for the horror stuff to actually kick in. Once it does kick in, I think it's really well done. It's very like rooted in psychological horror and essentially Carla's internal selves and stuff like coming out and becoming antagonistic essentially. Yeah, I thought it was decent. It's a good debut for sure, but I really think we just didn't need the first half of the book. I think it was really slow, just building up this picture of them as a family, and I think we got enough of that in the latter portion. It took a long time for us to get to the part where they essentially leave where they're living and go to this cabin, and that's where things really start getting creepy. And yeah, I think that's probably why it missed the mark, and people really don't like some of the dialogue and stuff in this book because it is very teen of that era speak. Like there's something about how the boy's like, oh, I popped my ex-girlfriend's cherry outside of Panda King or whatever. It is silly. This book is very humorous as well, and I do think it's intentionally humorous. Maybe some of the writing is not intentionally humorous, but there is a lot of humor running throughout this book, throughout the characters' inner dialogues, because we are seeing it from each of their perspectives. But yeah, overall, I thought this was quite a fun one. Not anything amazing, but I would say if you're interested in what this book is about, maybe give it a try, because I don't think it necessarily deserves the really low rating it's got. It's currently on a 3.13. I actually read this because I'm doing the hardest reading challenge you'll ever do, so I had to read the books that were essentially the lowest rated on my TBR, and this was one of them. And was it great? No. But did I kind of have a good time with it? Yeah. So, Eat the Ones You Love by Sarah Maria Griffin was one of the ones that I think was getting some quiet hype towards the start of this year. I know a lot of people, like Books and Lala for example, saw this cover and saw that it was about a man-eating plant and was kind of queer, and was basically like, this is the Little Shop of Horrors, but as an actual horror book. And I think it's slightly inspired by it, but not a lot, unfortunately. I received this as an ARC, so I read this way back in March or so, and I didn't love it, unfortunately. I think what people are finding is that this is very much not quite what it's been advertised as. It does go hard on the horror when we get the horror, but it's really not that campy, unfortunately, and I also felt like it took a long time for it to get going. It almost feels more literary for the first half of the book. So we are following this woman called Shell. She's recently like lost her job, moved back home. Everything's a bit shit for her. She gets a job in a mall, mostly because she's kind of entranced by the woman who owns a plant shop called Neve. Turns out Neve, however, has been looking after this specific sentient plant who very much wants to eat people, is gaining further sentience, and kind of wants to like combine with Neve. It all gets a bit weird. And yeah, a lot of this is about Shell and Neve kind of growing closer, the plant growing closer to both of them, and their interactions with the other people that work in this like mall that's due to be kind of taken down at some point soon. Like, it is a struggling economy kind of area that they're in, but it's also about Shell sort of growing as a person, her maybe realizing that the people that she used to hang out with are not really people that she likes anymore, but she's very much falling under the spell of the plant, and that is kind of what it's about. And I really wanted to love it, but I just didn't, unfortunately. I gave it a 3-star and all. I really wanted more from the queerness, and whilst I liked when we got some of the plant body horror, I wish there had been more, to be honest. So yeah, just a little bit disappointing. It was a lot more slow burn than I was expecting it to be. Definitely not at all like the movie, I would say. I did like it was set in Ireland, though. That was nice. And I think I probably would check out more from this author before, because I could see like parts of this book that I did like. It just didn't quite work for me. And I kind of saw the conclusion coming a long way off, and I would have really liked a twist, I think, from that. So yeah, a little bit disappointing. 3-star, I think. One I'm not too surprised to have not seen in the Goodreads Award. So I finally read the short novella by Drew Hoff, My Name Isn't Paul, which is cosmic eldritch horror. And I actually really enjoyed this one. I saw this one kind of around a little bit throughout the year. I think it actually came out too late to be in the Goodreads Choice Awards, and I also just don't think many people have read it, but I read it, so I thought I would tell you about it. And I actually really quite enjoyed this one. It is very short. I think the version I read was only about 80 pages, but I think it was very stretched down in the arc, so I believe on Goodreads it does actually come to about 170 pages, but I found it to be a very quick read. I really liked that our main character, Paul, who is not really Paul, he is an alien living inside the body of Paul and trying to come to terms with his alienness, and he kind of just wants to be human. And it's weirdly cute and kind of sad at the same time, but because he is alien, he goes to this like family reunion with all the other aliens that he nested in, essentially, and he is kind of struggling with the fact that he kind of craves meat and he's kind of cannibalistic, and he keeps getting told that he is going to go into heat at some point soon and he won't be able to control what he's doing. He'll just wreak havoc, essentially, because his kind want to make babies. And yeah, I really liked this. I didn't really expect much from it, but I thought it really did say a lot for a very small novella. And I would definitely read more by Drew Hoff, I think, in the future. I believe they've got some books coming out next year, which also sound very interesting. This one and this one I'm very much wanting to check out. This may be their debut, I'm not entirely sure, but yeah, I thought it was really good for a debut. It kept me interested. I actually really liked all the characters, like getting to see the other aliens and the lives they were taking was really interesting, and it was nice to see this like really human take on being an alien, on an alien who doesn't even really want to be an alien and is actually like quite happy with the human's life he's kind of taken. So yeah, interesting book. If you want something short and cosmic, I recommend.